What if the clearest path to self-awareness is not looking harder at yourself, but learning to see yourself in God's light? Welcome to Speaking from the Heart. I'm Richard Fontanie, and I'm glad that you're here today. Whether you're listening quietly, walking, driving, or taking a pause in the middle of a busy schedule. And today's conversation is about self-awareness, not the kind rooted in self-criticism or comparison, but the kind grounded in faith, and truth, and grace. Now, before we go any further, if this podcast is meaningful to you, please take a moment to subscribe. It helps others find these conversations and allows us to continue sharing reflections that connect faith with everyday life. When we hear the phrase self-awareness, it can sometimes sound psychological or self-focused, yet Scripture consistently invites us into a deeper, a more honest understanding of who we are. The Gospel Paul writes in Romans chapter 12, "Do you think of yourself more highly than you ought? But rather think of yourself with sober judgment." Notice the balance here. He counsels us not to be inflated or diminished, but to be truthful in all that we do. True self-awareness begins with humility. It requires the courage to look forward and inward without fear, knowing that God already sees us fully and loves us completely. Psalm 139 reminds us, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me." God's knowledge of us is not distant or condemning. It is intimate, compassionate, and loving. And many of us struggle with self-awareness because we confuse it with self-judgment. We sometimes notice that our flaws and assume God is disappointed. Or we cling to our strengths and forget our dependence on grace. Faith-based self-awareness invites us into a different posture, one of honesty held with mercy. Now, Jesus spoke often about awareness, especially when it came to our inner selves. For instance, in Matthew chapter 7, he asks, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye?" Now, this teaching is not meant to shame us, but to awaken us. It reminds us that growth begins not with correcting others, but with examining ourselves. In everyday life, we lack of self-awareness and often shows up quietly. A leader may wonder why their team feels distant. A business owner may feel constantly overwhelmed without understanding why. And a parent may react with patience or an impatience and later feel regret. Without reflection, these patterns repeat. And with faith-centered awareness, they become invitations to growth. Now, here's a story about a small business owner who was deeply committed to his faith. Yet, he consistently felt frustrated at work. He prayed daily, worked hard, and led with integrity. And through reflection and prayer, he realized that his frustration wasn't caused by his employees, but by his fear of losing control. Seeing this truth allowed him to release what he was gripping tightly and trust God more fully. Now, that awareness changed not only his leadership, but his peace as well. Self-awareness in God's light also reveals our gifts. Not too often, humility is mistaken for self-denial. Yet Scripture affirms that we are each given unique talents to steward. When we recognize our strengths with gratitude rather than pride, we honor the giver. When we deny them, we bury what was meant to serve others. Faith helps us hold truths and not be limited. We are imperfect, yes, but we are also deeply valued. And this balanced awareness protects us from burnout and from our ego. It keeps us grounded and growing. In work and in business, spiritual self-awareness is especially practical. When we understand our motivations, we can ask better questions. Am I striving from fear or from purpose? Am I serving others or seeking approval? Am I working to improve my worth or responding to a calling? Now, these are not abstract questions. They shape how we lead, communicate, and make decisions. Daily practices help cultivate this awareness. A simple, prayerful reflection at the end of the day can be very, very powerful. Asking, where did I sense God's presence today? And where did I resist it? An open space for learning without judgment. And silence, through uncomfortable at first, feels what noise feels like. Community also plays a role. Trusted friends, mentors, and faith companions can help us see what we cannot see on our own. And Proverbs reminds us that wise counsel brings clarity. Self-awareness is not a solo journey. It's shaped through our relationships. And as we grow in awareness, and compassion naturally follows. When we understand our own struggles, we become gentler towards others. And when we recognize our dependence on grace, we extend it more freely. And this is how inner awareness transforms our outer relationships. Now, as we close, I ask you to reflect on where might God be gently inviting you toward greater self-awareness? What pattern keeps repeating in your life? And what emotion have you been avoiding? What truth have you been resisting? Now, you don't need to answer all of these questions at once. Growth unfolds in seasons. Simply begin by bringing your honest self into God's presence, into the divine within you. Now, their awareness becomes healing and truth becomes freedom. And so may you become to know yourself clearly, not through harsh judgment, but through God's loving light. And may that awareness guide you toward deeper faith, wiser choices, and a life shaped by grace. Now, thank you for joining me in this episode today. In our next episode, we'll explore a growth mindset from a gospel and a universal values perspective. I hope you can join me. I'm Richard Fontanie, signing off for now, and see you next Monday, if not before. Bye now.